It's September 11th, 2025, marking another year since the Twin Towers attacks. As an Israeli, I tell the American people that I stand with you, I support you, commemorating the victims. Israel also faced a massive attack similar to the Twin Towers on October 7th. So we share the same root that tries to destroy the values of freedom. It attacked us too. I want to show you a video from September 11th from that day. What you see on the screen are the Palestinians celebrating what happened on September 11th. This is the same day in real time.
The United States government has obviously become more and more unpopular, especially in the western part.
I don't know if people didn't learn anything from history, because that's exactly what happened on October 7th. The streets too, on October 7th, 2023. With everything they were doing to Israel, they were also handing out sweets in the street, they were taking selfies, they were celebrating with music. As you can see, this isn't new. Why would they be celebrating an attack on innocents on the other side of the planet? It's chilling that people haven't realized we might be fighting the same population. And here's the craziest part. Here you can see innocent Palestinian children celebrating and think that if they were children in 2001, when the attacks were happening, today they are the adults who are now trying to destroy Israel. It's the same mentality, because if it's a child celebrating, it's the end of America. 2,000 people were victims in an attack thanks to Osama. Today, those are exactly the jihadists that I had to fight and all that. But that's not even the craziest part. Did you know it took the West 20 years for its own society to start justifying September 11th? We all know this face, it's Bin Laden, and he wrote a letter to the United States, an open letter, a letter to America. Yes, he wrote 2 letters actually, one for the people of America, another letter to America, where he explains why the September 11 attacks happened. It turns out those letters went viral. Here we can see the date, November 2023, and they went viral as a result of the war in Gaza. Remember, this occurred only a month after the October 7 attacks, with hundreds of hostages still in Gaza. By about November 16, people were already talking about genocide and the whole story. In fact, on September 8, and I remember it very well, there were already marches in England. I also remember in Chile people saying maybe they're committing a genocide. I mean, they had already started it. The genocide narrative on September 8, when our loved ones were still smoldering from being cremated. The point is that Bin Laden, his letters went viral on TikTok. Even TikTok had to block that hashtag. And I'm going to read you some excerpts from Bin Laden's letter. The letter essentially justifies the Twin Towers attacks and explains their intent to continue similar attacks. And then they start saying, no, the United States is bad, they occupy our land and invade us and all that, and we are going to fight. And it says the option you Americans have is to accept Islam, and not just any version. Radical jihadist Islam, the most extreme form associated with Al-Qaeda. Remember, Osama founded Al-Qaeda, which is Al-Qaeda in Spanish. You accept it, or the other option is jihad and war. This is basically what the letter says. And it blew my mind to see so many people on TikTok, because you can also follow us on Jewish philosophy on TikTok. We're there. And I remember seeing people saying, wow, look, this letter is right. We hadn't understood. Osama is right. Read the letter. I mean, it took the United States, this new generation, 2 decades to justify an attack that was made against them. And that the other option is simply to accept the radical Islam. And I'm going to read you parts of the letter. And it's related to Judaism. First, the creation of Israel is a crime that must be erased. What does Israel have to do with it? That is, Bin Laden's thesis is, well, let's attack the United States, carry out attacks against them. Why? The letter basically says Israel exists. Each and every person whose hands have been stained by contributing to this crime. For him, Israel is a crime. They must pay the price and pay it dearly. There is a section where Bin Laden writes that if Americans contribute with their taxes to support Israel, that makes Americans criminals already, and that's why they deserve to be attacked. That's basically the thesis. I show another section. You can find that letter online and you can be shocked by all the things it says. But for example, it says it's laughable and brings tears to see that you still haven't gotten tired of repeating your invented lies. That the Jews have a historical right over Palestine, just as it was promised to them in the Torah. You don't have to be a believer to know that there is a historical connection between the Jewish people and this land. Even an atheist is aware of that. Historians, let's say those who are most against religious narratives, know this, and not because they believe that God gave the land to Israel in the Torah. There is a millennia-old connection between the Israeli people and our land. And the letter goes on to say, it is not the Jews who are the heirs of this Palestine, but rather the Muslims, the heirs of Moses and the heirs of the true Torah, which has not been altered. If the followers of Moses have been promised the right to Palestine in the Torah, then the Muslims are the nation most worthy of it. According to them, Islam promised them Palestine, and that's why, like Israel, we must be destroyed. Because, you see, it's like replacement theology, but to the extreme. And that's the kind of language. To those in the West watching us, I want to repeat something I've said in many videos. And it's the mistake of thinking that this conflict is territorial. Because apparently what bin Laden is saying is, well, I'm going to attack the United States because we Muslims are the ones who deserve Palestine. Though they're unhinged, they don't realize the territorial aspect isn't truly fundamental. Here, the conflict is religious. And if you look at that letter, it starts quoting verses from the Quran about having to do jihad and attacking them. He cites countless Quran verses to justify his attack, saying, and strike their necks. And here the narrative is religious. That's why I invite you to learn more about the Torah, to learn more about Judaism, and not so that you become Jewish or become believers. Not even that. Because the importance of knowing the religious language gives us the opportunity to know how to solve this conflict. Because if the conflict is not essentially territorial, but rather religious in nature, this conflict will not be solved by giving land. That is not the solution. Hamas isn't asking for a country or more land. Instead, they're seeking Israel's destruction due to its religious nature. The fact that the people of the Bible have returned to the land of the Bible is something that short-circuits the narrative of radical Islam. That's why I invite you to explore our Jewish philosophy page, where we discuss these topics in depth. Because if we understand the religious dialectic, it will be much easier for us to address the challenge they want to present on a religious level. I'm going to read you more sections of the letter, and it says, this is criticizing the United States to justify the attack. And it says, supported the Jews in their idea that Jerusalem is their eternal capital, and have agreed to move their embassy there. Look, little bin Laden, already deceased. The word Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran, while it appears nearly 700 times in the Tanakh. In the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, a book that our ancestors literally gave their lives to protect, the Tanakh. All these books behind me and more. And all of this is just a small part of what Jewish literature is. That is, we are called the people of the book. Do you know which book they're referring to? The Tanakh. All of this revolves around the Tanakh. That is, the Tanakh is like the text that gives us life. And Jerusalem is like the center of all Jewish spirituality, Jewish politics, Jewish life, Jewish philosophy. The entire essence of the Jewish people, the soul of the Jewish people, is Jerusalem. So yes, it is our eternal capital. But I keep reading. The Jews have taken control of your economy. Here bin Laden starts listing all the medieval myths about Jews, summarizing anti-Semitic myths in one paragraph, through which they have taken control of your media, and now they control every aspect of your life, turning us into their servants and achieving their goals at your expense. In one paragraph, he covered the most famous medieval myths except the one about us killing God, which he missed. He says, your law serves the rich and powerful who control political parties and fund campaigns with donations. Behind them are the Jews who control our politics, our media, and our economy. Yes, we control the media so much that right now the media is mostly against Israel. We control the economy so much, that's why Qatar has so much influence in universities, the media, and politics, not to mention. Yes, that's why, because we Jews are. It's not Qatar, it's not other participants, like there's a Chinese lobby and a Russian lobby. Bin Laden will then offer a solution to the United States and the West, since the United States represents the most powerful Western country. But, if the United States falls, who's next? The rest, all the non-Muslims. And here, Bin Laden is going to offer them the solution. What is the solution? That they convert to Islam. And he says the following about Islam. It is to this religion that we invite you, the seal of all previous religions. It is the religion of Jihad in the path of Allah, so that the word and religion of Allah reigns supreme. He says there are other ideologies and a different democracy. Forget Judaism and everything else. Erase it all. Only Islam matters. And if you don't have it, you will see the American consequences. That's the narrative he was presenting. That's why I'm shocked that all these kids on TikTok are making bin Laden's letter go viral, even though he's explicitly telling them they only have one option, radical Islam. There's no other option. He says, if you don't meet these conditions, prepare to fight the Islamic nation. After that, bin Laden starts to explain more of his arguments about how the West attacks Muslims and that they are invading their lands. The same tale of oppressed and oppressor, anti-colonialism and colonialism, despite Islam being the most expansionist religion. I mean, just look at Europe as an example. But this is where he justifies the attack and tells them, that's why the American people cannot be innocent of all the crimes committed by Americans and Jews against us. This paragraph, by the way, catches my attention because bin Laden separates the Jews from the Americans. I mean, there are Jews in the United States and bin Laden separates them. And do you know why? Because Jews essentially are not a religion. That's one of the, let's say, big confusions that in Islam, I think they have very clear that we are a people. And we are a people who were dispersed for 2,000 years. In other nations in the West, it was like that for a long time. For example, in France. Did you know that Jews were considered for centuries, until Napoleon, that Napoleon made them citizens? But for centuries, Jews were considered as the refugees from the Kingdom of Judea in France. That's how they were classified, as the refugees of Judea. Then Napoleon made them citizens. From the Napoleonic emancipation onwards, that's when Jews became Argentine Jews, Russian Jews, and so on. But Jews still saw themselves as a scattered people. That has been something very well known. And that's why around here, I think, bin Laden separates them. He says, expect only jihad, resistance, and revenge from us. And that's how he justifies the attacks. And it's crazy. I'm also going to show you another letter, which you can also see from the United States government. This is publicly available, correct? The United States government provides it to the public. So people can see the psychopathy and anti-Semitism in these guys' mentality. This is at the Office of National Intelligence. And it says, as for us, jihad against tyrants and aggressors is a form of great worship in our religion. That phrase is basically the narrative of Hamas. What people don't understand is people believe that Hamas is a resistance, that it's fighting against the oppressive state of Israel. Isn't that so, people? They haven't understood anything. If people would listen, not so much to the Western professors at universities with their rings and in the humanities departments saying all those psychedelic things. What they should do is listen to the jihadists themselves. The jihadists themselves tell you right to your face. There's no need to speculate much. They're telling you. Jihad is a form of worship in our religion. For them, war is sacred and dying as a martyr is honorable. Martyr refers to someone who goes to war to convert infidels, and he is killed in war. For them, that's a merit, since he's now a shaheed, a martyr. It's the psychedelic part. They say it openly. Go on. He is more precious to us than our parents and children. Gentlemen, this phrase, if you haven't understood it, please ask Hamas, because this is what we're seeing in real time. Bin Laden is telling you this to your face. Jihad is more precious to them than their own children. That is, yes, destroying Israel is a goal of jihad. That is more precious. Destroying Israel is more precious than their own children. That's why Westerners don't get confused. Don't be surprised. When you see that Hamas hides behind human shields, hides among the civilian population. Do you know about the kilometers and kilometers of tunnels that Hamas has in Gaza? About 400 kilometers of tunnels? Why, England. In World War II, when German planes were bombing London, what did the people of London do? They went underground and took shelter because it was like the bomb-proof area. So they went to the underground shelter, and that's how they were saved from the German bombs. Why doesn't Hamas, having so many kilometers of tunnels, put their entire population in there easily? Why don't they let the civilian population enter the tunnels? And who is in the tunnels? The terrorists and the kidnapped Israelis that they have down there. No one else? The civilians are above, and the tunnels deliberately are under hospitals, under mosques. I don't understand why it's so surprising if they're telling you right to your face. And he goes on to say, therefore, our jihad against you is worship. Justice is the strongest army, and security is the best way of life. But did it get out of your hands the day you allowed the Jews to occupy our land and kill our brothers in Palestine? If you see the madness, How is it possible that bin Laden, a guy who was part of a wealthy aristocratic family from Saudi Arabia, uses Israel as an argument to attack the United States, to attack the West? For me, it's clear, because in Israel we represent a freer, better world. To aspire to something, like a messianic era. Yes, the era of the Messiah means, in Spanish, a better world where competition doesn't exist. Without war, enjoy. That's what we represent. What they represent, as you saw, this ideal of war and destroying the other matters more to them than their own parents and children, in their own words. In other words, they are the antithesis. That's why going against Israel is exactly going against values that have to do with freedom. And it's aligning yourself with these kinds of nefarious people who are willing to burn the world, to destroy everything, just to oppress and worsen the world. That's why I'm very grateful to all of you who support Israel, who offer your prayers for the peace of Jerusalem. Because, as the prophet said, from Zion will come forth the Torah and the word of Hashem. From Jerusalem, that is, it goes out to the nations of the world. From here is this core of ideas that humanity's future will take to improve. And those who want to destroy that better future, they are precisely those allies of evil who, just like in 2001, attacked the United States and attacked so many innocent people. On October 7, 2023, they tried to wipe us out again, but they won't succeed. We will triumph. Thanks to supporters like you, Besrat Hashem, may He grant us joyful days soon. Greetings from Israel.